Here we go. I think we're now fully transcribing. So just a heads up that we've already conducted several webinars and workshops where we discuss general information about the program. So if you didn't have a chance to attend a webinar or workshop, I strongly recommend you go back and watch our pre-recorded fiscal year 25 general overview webinar. Since we aren't going to go everything that we discussed in the previous events at this session, a link to our webpage that contains slides from many of our presentations can be found at the bottom of this slide. In this Q&A session, we're briefly going to go over the basics of the program and then delve a little bit deeper into what can make your application a little bit more competitive. So before we get started, please mute yourself and turn off your cameras, and that's going to help with internet connection stability. I'm also going to turn off my camera while presenting, but feel free to add questions into the chat, and at the end of the webinar, Stacy and I will try and answer your questions. All right. So just to go over some of the basics of our program here, if you'll give me just a second. Oh boy, I'm having a little bit of a problem here with our screen. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, so just to quickly go over some of the basics of our program and this year's grant round. The HPCAP program funds capital projects for historic properties with a focus on the protection, preservation, or restoration of the funded sites. It's a highly competitive program since there's a limited allocation of only $600,000 per year for the entire state. Awardees are given a maximum grant of $100,000, but projects well under that amount have been funded before. We do have a suggested minimum amount of about $10,000. So if your project needs less than that amount, reach out to me and we can discuss your project scope and budget. Anyone or any entity is eligible to apply for this grant funding, but unless you're applying as a nonprofit entity, you will be required to provide a one-to-one match, either as a cash match or an in-kind donation, or a combination of the two. If you're applying as a state agency, you should apply as a nonprofit organization in your application. We've recorded a webinar that goes into a lot more detail concerning the match requirement, and you can find all of our webinars on our YouTube channel, which is linked below. And I've also included a direct link to the slides from the fiscal year 25 general overview webinar below. The property that you're seeking funding for must either be listed or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, either as a resource, as an individual resource, or a resource that contributes to a National Register district. It can also be a National Historic Landmark. So if you're working with one of those, you're also eligible to apply. Just know that local designation may not rise to the level of National Register eligibility. So if you're unsure if your property is eligible, please reach out to us with the address of your property, a historic context of the property, and some really clear photographs. We can have our National Register specialist do some digging and determine if your property is eligible. So for a project to be eligible for the grant, the work must be associated with a capital improvement. And that means that the scope of work that you provide in your application should be construction related. This grant can't fund broader studies such as historic contexts, master plans, or research for historical interpretation. However, nonprofits and local governments can apply for pre-development services that will directly lead to a capital project. These would include documents such as civil engineering studies, historic building assessments, architectural drawings, or bidding services. Also, even if the project is eligible, the most competitive projects will focus on construction to historic elements of the building, not new construction or utility or mechanical upgrades. While these items are definitely important, they will not score as highly as an application that seeks to restore or rehabilitate historic features such as roofs, foundations, historic trim and plaster, windows, and other historic features. And finally, the application round will close on March 17th at 11:59 p.m. We're not going to be working until midnight that day, so we strongly suggest that you submit your application well in advance of the closing date in case you run into technical issues with your electronic submission. If you do run into technical issues that prevent you from submitting your application, reach out to us the next day. We might be able to help find the issue and get the application submitted for review. So, oh, sorry, one second. I'm having another issue here. There we go. All right, so there are a few resources that can get started on your app to help you get started on your application. To create a new application, you're going to want to follow the links on the right-hand side of the main program webpage. You can see the two arrows there to the right. This year, individuals and organizations will follow separate links to apply. MHT is currently transitioning our grants management system, and what that means for you is that if you're a returning applicant, you'll need to create a new login ID and password in the new system and use the new links to access your fiscal year 25 application. To access applications from previous grant rounds with an existing username, you can go to the My Grant Account button on the main program page shown here on the left side. So navigating to the guidelines and resource page, you can locate the program guidelines, which go into further detail about eligibility, the application submittal process, how to complete the application, how the application will be reviewed by the committee, and additional information concerning timelines, budgets, eligible expenses that we're not going to go over here today. This same webpage also contains links to materials that you'll use to submit your application, shown here in the box. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I'm having an issue. This is what you guys should have been saying. Sorry about that. So these include copies of what you're going to look here in the box is where you're going to see your application materials. These include copies of the budget spreadsheet template, property owner consent template, a document that helps you get started on applying using our electronic system, and several others that you're going to need. You can also find slides for our previous webinar and a link to our YouTube channel that has recorded web versions of our webinars, the matching requirements presentation, and a lot of other useful videos. I strongly suggest you watch some of these before starting your application. And again, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us and we can go over any that you might have. So how to start to kind of broadly approach the application. When thinking about how to get started and to make your application more competitive, it helps to know how the team is going to review your application. Focus your energy on the most important items or sections in the application. So can you describe the goals of the project and how they relate to the purpose of the HP program? Can you make the historic preservation connection? Is your organization's mission clear? And does the overall project provide a public benefit beyond the needs of yourself or your organization? What will the funds be specifically used to pay for, and how will the project be carried out? So why is your project important? These are just a few questions to keep in mind when completing your application. And the clearer you make your project to the reviewer, the more competitive it becomes. In addition to understanding how your application will be reviewed, it helps to make the application easier for the committee to review. Use clear, really concise, original language. Don't just cut and paste sections from a different document. Make sure that all sections are filled out, even if there isn't a ton of information to provide. Ensure that all the information you want to give the reviewers is in the appropriate section of the application, and leave no portion of the application blank. Add information into every section of the application. So paying attention to the smaller details and the formatting, that'll help make your application more professional and easier to review. And just as a pro tip, if you've already applied to the program in the past and you intend to apply again for the same project, please do not just resubmit your previous application. Think about the reasons it wasn't funded before and revise the application so that those are addressed. And submitting the same application over and over will not make it more competitive. So while all sections of the application are important and should be fully completed, there are a few sections that are given more weight by the review committee. The project description, significance and urgency, and the public benefit and impact sections will be where the meat of the review will take place. So being descriptive, concise, and clear in these sections will make it easier for the review committee to understand your project. So let's go into the project description section first. So when filling out this section, think about the specific project that you're applying for and how it will be completed. Make sure that the reviewers will be able to easily visualize your project so they can ensure that the project scope is eligible and it'll be competitive. Avoid broad descriptions and list only construction-related tasks, not the mission of your organization or the history of the site. They're going to be handled in a different section of the application. Detail what the grant funds, if they're going to be awarded to you, will pay for specifically. The more detailed you can be about how the project will be carried out, the fewer questions the reviewers are going to have about your project. For example, if your project funds are going to support the stabilization of a structure, list the steps that you're going to take to complete that project. Will the roof, foundation, or other structural members be repaired or replaced? Will masonry repointing and drainage improvements be a part of the stabilization project? You don't have to go into great detail about how the steps will be carried out, but it will help the reviewers to see that there are specific tasks in mind. So also provide any estimates that you might have as an attachment and make sure that you discuss them in your project construction project description. Also, you should discuss exactly where on the structure or at the site the work is going to take place. There may be restrictions on what portions of the building or site the grant could fund, particularly if you're going to apply for work on a religious site or structure. And if you're applying for work on a religious site, please reach out to us in advance of submitting an application. That can make sure that you're requesting funds for portions of the building that are going to be eligible for the work. And finally, the goal of the grant funding is to help preserve these buildings and sites, not just to address aesthetic or general maintenance issues. So think about what the most critical items are to prevent further degradation of your building or your site and try to prioritize those. If you're applying to refinish the floor, paint siding, or recreate like a plaster medallion or something, and you have a hole in the roof of your building or your foundation is deteriorating or failing, the reviewers are going to note that the structural issues are much more pressing, and this section of your application may not score as highly. So just a pro tip, since this grant funding is meant to restore or preserve historic features and because the work has to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, noting that the work will replace or repair the material with the same exact type of material, which is also known as in-kind work, that's going to go a long way to showing your understanding how the project can be accomplished while meeting MHT's mission. So this section of the application is also heavily weighted, and this is a significance section. Significance refers to the significance of the site itself, not the project or your organization's mission. You should discuss the history of your site in detail and try to differentiate it from others that might be of the same type. You know, was your building or was a site pivotal to a significant local, regional, or national event? Is it the first of its type, or is it a really unique form of architecture? Have there been changes that have occurred to the site or building since it was first constructed? Is this the best example of a specific historic theme, such as an early dairy practice in Maryland? You know, please keep in mind that the significance of the place may also change over time, often above and beyond what made it important historically. Think about why your site is not only significant to the past, but why it's important today. Was a historic school building later used as a home base for an important civil rights organization? Does the community now use an old bank building as the primary gathering or event space for the community? Was an old train station later refurbished to be a commercial business that was important to the redevelopment of the town? So why is your site important to you today? Paint us a picture. You know your site better than any reviewer, so make the case for why your property is unique. Another pro tip, we do not need your MIHP form or your NRHP nomination form, which if your property was previously surveyed, we already have access to. What's going to be really helpful is information that can go above and beyond what those documents kind of spell out. So for urgency, urgency in the context of this application has two meanings. First, there's kind of the obvious urgency associated with stopping a structure from further degradation or preventing, things like encroaching development. Is the poor condition of your site preventing it from being used? If no action is taken now, what further damage is going to occur to the building, and how long will it take before the damage is irreversible? Clearly explain in your scope why the scope you're applying for is the most critical for your site, and tie that back to the construction project for how it will help alleviate that issue. The other type of urgency we're going to talk about is urgency of need, which refers to the financial ability of your organization to complete the project without intervention from this grant. Have you applied for other grant funding and been denied? Have you looked into loans that never materialized? Did fundraising efforts that, you had to address the issue not provide enough to complete the project? So discuss what avenues of funding you've tried to explore or that you've exhausted before applying for this grant. While it's not necessary to discuss the urgency of need if you don't have one, especially if MHT's funding will only make up a percentage of the total project, it helps to show the reviewers that MHT's intervention might be the only way that the issues are addressed. And one thing to keep in mind, if MHT's funding will make up only a portion of the overall project, make sure that you include all of the sources of funding that will go toward the overall project in the budget section of your application, as well as on your budget spreadsheet. This lets the reviewer know that the project might move forward a little more quickly, or that state funds will be used, which really can't be paired easily together to tackle the same project. And so public benefit. This is one of the most heavily weighted sections of the application, and one that's a little bit difficult to grasp for a lot of applicants. The public benefit of your project refers to how the completed project will positively impact the general public and not just your constituents, the congregation, or your local patrons. While those cohorts are important, the goal of the project will be to allow others who may have no understanding of the site to be educated about its history or to continue its use as an active space. And for that reason, although individuals and businesses are eligible to apply, and you guys may even have really great projects at important sites, they often aren't a great fit because the benefit of the project will relate to a much smaller group or for personal benefit. But if you're applying as an individual or as a business, it doesn't automatically mean that you won't be competitive, but you'll need to clearly show that you have a plan in place to provide a broader public benefit beyond your own needs. This doesn't mean friends or customers coming into your property. It means providing some form of public programming around the history of your site. If the project will help accomplish a historical programming mission, provide additional accessibility, or even possibly create partnerships with other organizations, you should make those cases in this section in detail. Think about how visitors will engage with the site, what history is being conveyed, how you're going to use the site in the future. For example, will a roofing project allow an organization to continue its mission by reoccupying the building? Will the restoration of a historic clock tower reactivate a physical touchstone for the community? Will repairing a barn structure allow access for visitors to get a sense of life on a 19th century tobacco farm? Those are just a few examples, but also elaborate on how the site will specifically be used to educate the public. Will interpretive markers be installed that detail the significance of the building? Will school classes visit the site to gain an understanding of an earlier time? If your site is an event space, will a portion of it be set aside for historical education, such as artifacts, primary documents, and other relics that can easily be viewed by your renters? Providing a clear educational component to your project will illustrate the impact that your project will have on visitors and how they'll walk away with a better understanding of your historic site. And so for documentation, there's going to be a lot of documentation that you'd like to include, and we're not going to go over everything here today. But we have seen some things that kind of are common issues that we've run into. We've often had applications that effectively spell out a project, its significance, its public benefit, but are missing a lot of the documents we need to either have a better understanding of the project or are required to establish an applicant's eligibility. In the next few slides, we're going to go over the most common documents that are either omitted or not completed correctly. So photographs. Photographs are probably the easiest way to show the significance of your property, its historic context, and the critical issues that the grant funding is going to help to alleviate. Providing clear photographs lets the reviewer see exactly what the issues are and the severity of the damage that needs to be fixed, or the importance of a historic feature that you're going to try to restore. At least one of the photographs should be a context photo, and that shows the entirety of the building or site and not just the area of where work will take place. The photo will help give the reviewers a sense of the overall site, its architectural significance, and its historic setting. If you're selected for an award, this photo is going to be what MHT is going to use in outreach materials and social media posts. So make sure that the building or site is in focus, not skewed, and free of obstructions like your friends and other animals that may get in the way. So you also need to provide additional photos of the area of work that is going to be the same area that's described in your construction project description. If you're applying for roof repairs, please do not include other areas of site that may need work, such as flaking paint on your siding, since that's going to confuse a review team. The review team may have questions about the accuracy of your construction project description. The photos of the area of the work where it should take place should be clear and should capture enough of the issue to let the reviewer make an informed decision as to the severity of the problem. A good example of this is this set of photos from the Jane Gates House in Cumberland. The photo on the left is the top is a concept map that shows the overall building and its important character defining features. And the next shot at the bottom clearly shows the location of the damage on the porch that'll be addressed with this grant. You're going to need to provide at least 10 photos as an attachment to your application. And we developed a photo template that can be found on our webpage. All you need to do is click in the blank box in the template, and the program will automatically select a photograph from your file to upload, and then it'll format that to fit in that box. But one pro tip here is, take clear photographs of the most critical areas and provide captions that clearly explain to the reviewer what we're looking at. We often can't tell the urgency of the situation just based on the photo alone, and just a shot of a wall with no description might not lead the reviewer to understand that the masonry is in need of reporting, or even what area of the photo shows the damage in question. So another thing to think about is organizational documents. If you're a business or a nonprofit applicant, you're going to need to provide a series of organizational documents. MHT is going to need a copy of your IRS determination letter or an umbrella letter if your organization is part of a larger organization, a full copy of your articles of incorporation, a full copy of your bylaws, and proof that your organization is registered with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, which is also known as SDAT. You'll also need to show that you're in good standing with SDAT. You will not be considered for a grant if you apply as a nonprofit or a business without supplying these documents. If you're not registered and in good standing with SDAT, you can apply right now. And once they receive your required application fee, they can get you a letter of temporary status, which will work for MHT's purposes while they prepare the full good standing letter. And another pro tip, please upload full copies of the organizational documents and not just snippets or certain pages. MHT reviews these documents for all types of information, and if pages are left out, it could hinder your ability to receive a grant. Oh, I'm so sorry. We are not done here. All applicants must provide a property owner consent letter. These are some of the other documents we're going to talk about. The letter states that the owner of the property is aware and supports the project for which the grant funds will be used. It also stipulates that the owner of the property agrees to the conveyance of a preservation easement or agreement to MHT. If you aren't familiar with easements yet, they're a deed restriction that protects your site or building from inappropriate alterations or degradation due to a lack of maintenance. So basically, the easement acts as a sort of miniature historic district, but just for your building. And MHT has to review all work that takes place to an area of a building or site that's covered by an easement, regardless of how the project is being funded. We aren't going to go over all the specifics of an easement in this presentation, but MHT has a presentation for easements on our YouTube channel if you'd like additional information. Just know that the conveyance of an easement to MHT is a requirement for all awardees of this program. Another pro tip is, just to make sure that your property owner consent letter is signed by the SDAT listed owner of the building or the site. You cannot consent to work on a structure or building that you are not the legal owner of. So make sure that you do have the signature from the person who is listed on SDAT as the owner. Another type of letter that we're going to get, or hopefully get from you all, is a letter of support. These can be uploaded as attachments to your application, and the letter of support should be drafted by someone who is familiar with your site and understands the positive effect the project will have on the site's preservation. The letters could be from congregants or patrons, ancestors of people who are historically associated with the site, community leaders, other nonprofit organizations that may have an interest in the site's preservation, and local, state, or national legislators. The letter should show the signer is aware of the significance of the site and specifically calls out the scope of work that you list in your application. Just another pro tip, again, the letter must be signed by the person who drafted it, or it will not be included in the application packet for reviewers. So just make sure that if you get a letter of support from a commissioner or mayor or legislator, that they actually sign that for you. And finally, if you're applying for funding for the exact same scope of work that you applied for in the past, either through an MHT grant or any other grant, you can use that same letter of support from an earlier or different grant request, just so long as for the exact same scope of work as what is already listed in your application. So if it's a different scope of work, you cannot use the same letter. So these were just kind of a few of the highlight items to go over, and some of the things you're going to be looking out for when we develop your application. But I strongly suggest that you read the grant guidelines and review all the other information on our HPCAP webpage. Since we didn't go into detail about everything here today, I'm including my contact information below. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. We can go over your application in a little bit more detail. Please note that we can't help write your application for you, but we can let you know if you're missing anything or if you're on the right track with a scope or a public benefit or section of your application. So now I'm going to open up the floor for questions, and we'll go back and forth between folks that raise their hands and questions in the chat. So let's see if we can get started here. I think we have at least one question in the chat. No, we do not. Okay. Does anyone have any questions at all that they would have about their project that is specific to their project or about the grant program? Okay, Diane, how can I help you? Oh, you're on mute, Diane. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. How's that?
Good, good. Can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. This is really helpful as somebody who's never gone down this path before. A question for you about estimates for a particular capital improvement job, project. So, you know, if I were wanting to restore the historic window frames, for example, would this process of applying for the grant require I have, 3 estimates from, contractors about what this project might cost in order to ask for this grant funding?
No, it's not a requirement that you provide 3 estimates. In fact, that's kind of overkill for most of the things we see. It's not even a requirement that you provide an estimate, right? But it does help kind of show the reviewer, hey, we have a general idea of the grant funding that we're asking for, and it's within reason. So I mean, if you're asking to repair the floors and you have a 500 square foot area and you're asking for $100,000, we're going to say why? That seems like a little bit higher than normal. So having that estimate just kind of bases your budget in a little bit of reality. But one estimate is good. We don't need multiple. And again, you don't have to provide an estimate, but it will help your application score a little bit more highly. But if you do get an estimate, I would definitely let whoever's giving you that estimate know that, hey, you might not be getting this job because MHT has a procurement process that's state regulated. And so, once you get grant funds, you can't just hire somebody willy-nilly. We really need to have a lot of input into how that goes. But having an estimate will definitely help you out as far as helping us determine if your budget is within reason.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely. Steve, how can I help you?
Good morning.
Hey.
I guess my question is, with all the items that we should be providing, will there be like an extension on, just for example, if we forget something, would our application just would be totally denied, or would it be sent back, say, hey, you guys, you need to send this or send that?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is we go through a process here, and I'll just let you know too that Stacy and I are not going to be the reviewers for this. What we're going to do is kind of help make sure that your application has all the pieces in place and that all the information is kind of provided there. And so we'll go through something called a threshold review process after the application period closes. And then we're going to be looking at every application and seeing, are we missing a budget, or are we missing a letter of support or a property owner letter, consent letter. And if that's the case, we're going to reach out to you.
Okay.
And then within reason, give you some time to try to provide that before it goes to the committee. So all is not lost if you have something that you think you've missed, or if we run into something that you've missed. We can't tell you to revise entire portions of your application, but if we're missing documents or something isn't clear in your budget versus your construction project description, we'll reach out and try to get that clarified.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
Yeah, no problem. Demeter, how can I help you?
Hey, Bill. So my question was, how recent does the assessment need to be to qualify? Like, is there like a preferred time frame or like specific documentation requires
You mean an estimate or an assessment?
the assessment and the estimate? Both.
For a building assessment? Is
Yeah,
that what
that's
you're saying?
correct.
Oh,
Because
okay.
we have one. I feel like it is pretty recent, but I just wanted to verify.
Yeah, so I mean, that's it's going to score highly the more recent it is, obviously, because we have a really good idea of kind of what the current status of your building is going to be. But if you have any assessment at all, even if it's a few years old, please include that. That gives us a good starting point to see, hey, we have a roof issue or a foundation issue that needs to be addressed, and maybe we don't need to work on painting the inside of the building. You know what I mean? So any assessment that you have, I'd say something over 5 years old, we're kind of pushing it at that point, because things may have changed and buildings can degrade fairly quickly if you don't take care of them. And so, I think that, but having an estimate within a few years, that at least gives us a good starting point for understanding kind of what the problems are.
And I'm just
Okay,
going to add on to that it helps us to show that you've started your homework on the property, that you if you're following that, perhaps maybe some of you did an assessment and you're kind of addressing the things that you can fix with, maybe you have a limited budget and you can do a couple of things, but you really need this to accomplish the big thing. It helps show us that you've looked into it, you've really done a full evaluation. Now, if you don't have that, and you're a nonprofit or a local government, you can ask to have that as part of your process. So if you haven't done that, if you're like, I don't have that, that might be the first thing you want to do, is include some kind of assessment of those critical issues.
Right.
No, it's been completed, so it's only about 2 or 3 years old. So I,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that wasn't too far
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Great, perfect.
No, that sounds reasonable for sure.
And include if you have, this is the thing, if you are, if in that assessment an engineer or somebody said, like, this is the most important thing and here are some pictures, like, you could include that report as an attachment, but make sure to reference it in your application. And if there's specific pages of that report where the specific issue you're looking to fund is mentioned, please include those in the application, because our reviewers, while they love reading assessments of historic buildings, when they're going through a mountain of applications, it's really helpful to be able to go directly to, okay, we have a roof issue. We had an assessment on page 42 of our 100-page assessment. They mentioned that, or you could just include those relevant pages. But if you're going to include the whole report, definitely direct reviewers to the pages where that information is contained.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely. And Jody or Jode, hopefully I'm saying your name correctly.
Hello, it's Jode.
Okay, hey Jode, how's it going?
It's going well. Good morning, everyone. I was wondering, so we have a capital project that we're applying for, and it's already an active restoration. It's Clifton Mansion, so we already have permission from the city. Do I need to ask again, or can I submit what I have?
So from the city or from the
The
state?
city owns Clifton Mansion.
Oh, okay. So I've definitely seen this name around before. So but we have an active restoration that's currently underway.
Yeah.
The city will need to provide a property owner consent letter again.
Okay.
And you'd want to go to the agency head. I
Right.
think Clifton's like Rec and Parks or something like that.
Yes, it is.
So you would want to go to the director of Rec and Parks
Okay.
to ask for them to sign the letter.
Yeah. So
Okay.
And what was the name of specifically, what was the name of the letter again? I'm sorry.
it's the property owner consent letter, and you're going to be able to find it on our website. There's like an
Okay.
actual template for you to download, and you can just hand it off to them. Even if we already have an easement obviously on it, and you've already applied before, you still have to
Okay.
go through the process every year.
Great. Thank you for confirming that for me.
No problem. Patricia, I think you're next. Hey Patricia, you're on mute, so I'm not sure if you're talking or not, but you were next in line. Okay, Patricia, we're going to come back to you. Yes, looks like you're still on mute, but yeah, we're happy to talk to you. So,
Okay.
oh,
All
there
right.
you are,
I'm
Patricia.
here.
I hear you.
figured out
Okay.
How to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So of course I have a capital project. It's structural. We have roofing issues. It's dilapidated roofing and foundation and windows and doors. So we're trying to prevent the elements from further decaying the Trovinger Mill, which is seated on the Antietam Creek.
Okay.
Right now, we are in the process of forming a nonprofit. We have applied for our 1023 501c3 status and going through the process of getting state recognition. However, we don't have all of that in place. So this year we're planning to apply for minimal funding, or at least begin the process with as an individual and homeowner, or not homeowner, but owner of the property. And then hopefully over time, kind of combine what we're doing in this to move it over to the nonprofit so that the nonprofit can apply for additional funds, because it's a large amount that I think we'll need for windows, doors, roof, structural stability. And we're also looking to combine that with bank improvements so that the building is not threatened by the Antietam Creek. So I understand that that's not something that you guys do. We'll have to combine it with, it may be not something you guys do, but we'll have to combine that with whatever the state will allow us to do at the creek side.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, what should we do to recognize that this is going to move to a nonprofit versus the individual? I just want to go through the process this year to make sure that I understand how to do it. So
Right.
maybe next year we can do something different if we can't do anything as an individual.
So you're asking, if for instance you're awarded, as an individual applicant, is it possible to transfer that award over to a nonprofit entity that you guys are forming?
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It can happen. I think Stacy's been through this a little bit more than I have. After that,
I'm going to jump in a little bit just because, this is a new peculiarity of the system that we're transferring into. For many a year, it was one application for everyone, but our system is insistent upon this new situation. So you'll have to apply as an individual if you don't have the organization, if an organization doesn't exist as of yet. Certainly send us that information. If you're in that situation, please reach out to us, just because yes, it is possible. It might just take some fancy footwork on the back end for us to make that happen. But if you are in that situation where you're an individual, but you're forming that, just send us that information. That way we can let the folks know who kind of handle more of that back end stuff, that they can, so they can get, we actually probably need some information on how that's going to work. That's one of the questions that we have to our group. So we would want to make it will work. It's possible. It's not an issue on your end. It's an issue on our end. So let us know that that's coming so we can be prepared for that, is how I'll phrase that.
All right, good. So that should still apply this year, because I was kind of discouraged when I couldn't pull up our nonprofit in the list, because we're just not there in the system yet. So yeah.
And if you get to the point, I mean, the timeline of this is that but if awards are given, we would likely be signing grant agreements in June. So I don't know where you would be in June. Or again, I want to make it for any organization that's in this situation, think about where you're going to be in June. So definitely provide that information to us, even if you're applying as an individual. Just, label like, first of all, include that you're applying as an individual, but in the process of developing your organization, and include your organizational documents in the things that you upload. And there's a place where you can just upload other things, and that'll help us make that transition more easily. And we can look into, we can verify all that information, because part of the the organizational application is like, we verify that you exist, that you have a EIN, that you exist in SDAT and all of that. So having those documents there can kind of help us get that established, even if you're not listed yet.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Hey, Steve, I know we talked a little bit earlier before. Did you raise your hand again, or is your hand still up here?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, you're good. I just see it up there. All right. Well, Diane, I was going to see if I could help you out.
Yeah, thanks. One other question. What I really would like to develop, I know this isn't part of this particular grant. I'm just wondering if Maryland Historic Trust can help support any of us who really want to develop I guess I would call it a preservation plan for our historic property. What kind of help, resources, advice, contractor lists, etc., can you provide to help us who would like to, create the big picture plan and then focus on individual projects within our plan?
Right. So what you're talking about is the non-capital grants, which we do have a few of. And we also have another organization that's kind of embedded into MHT, but separately, and that's the MHAA organization, Maryland Heritage Authorities. And that, although you do need to be in a Maryland Heritage Authority to apply for that grant. And so what I would suggest, Diane, if you want to, just reach out to me. After this call, I can send you the contact information for the non-capital grant funding. And this is something that they do kind of handle, museum things, preservation plans, things like code amendments, stuff like that. I can't tell you about how competitive those things will be just because I don't manage that program. But definitely reach out to me and I can get you the information to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely.
I'll paste the initial websites into the chat.
Oh, thanks, Stacy. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or anything they'd like to talk about their project? And so we're here, you got us, and we're happy to go through whatever questions you all have. Okay.
Well, and Bill, I typed into the chat a couple of things. There was a question about whether the application can be intermittently saved and submitted at a separate time, and the answer is yes. But for answering the questions, we do have a printed version or a PDF version of the application on the website that we recommend using that, writing your answers in words, because it does time out. So write everything in Word, get everything great, and then log in. It's easier to kind of paste things in there. Historically, there's been word counts on the answers. That does not exist anymore, although please do remember that, clear, concise. So we don't need a novel in every box, but so you can do that and just paste things in. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that because some of the answers take time to prepare. So using that Word document is helpful. But there isn't a word count, and yes, you can save and come back. You can upload and come back. And there are also, if you get into the application, there is a link within the application to the budget spreadsheet and a link to the photograph template. So those exist both on our website, but if you're in the middle of the application, you can also find it in there. We try to make it as helpful and as easy as possible.
Right. And Steve, again, I don't know if you raised your hand again, but it's still up there, and I didn't know if you had any other questions.
No, I didn't. Let me see what I can do to.
Okay. There it goes. I'm sorry. I don't want to miss you, Steve. So, well, hey, Demeter, it looks like you have another question. Can we help you out?
So no, it's not a question. I just wanted to make sure that I introduce the Pack-a-Pratt building. That's the one that I'm going to be submitting the application for. So right now the nonprofit is going to be for the University of Maryland Medical System, and the grant would definitely just help and support us in protecting the asset. Just for the structural integrity, the historical accuracy. So I just wanted to let you guys know that application's on its way. I'll be submitting it soon, and I hope you guys can help.
Yeah, definitely. What's the name of it? One more time, the Pack-a-Pratt?
Yeah, the Pack-a-Pratt building.
Oh, All right, Becca Pratt. Okay, that makes sense.
Real easy and fun, right? Yeah.
Yeah, easy. I gotta just in all honesty, I'm kind of new to Maryland. I've only been here a few years, so I'm learning all the
Oh, you need a history lesson
I'm-
for
I'm-
this
I-
area.
I work here now. Trust me, I've gotten a lot, but there's still a lot I have to learn. So
Okay, well, have fun
Yeah.
doing that. You definitely will. And
Yeah,
nice meeting the
definitely.
both of you.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be on the lookout for it though. And yeah, if you have any questions, let us know.
Can you all give us an idea of how many grants you typically fund every year?
So I'm happy to jump in on this one, Bill, if that's okay. So again, our allocation is $600,000 each year. So if everybody requests, if the winners all requested $100,000, 6. Last year we awarded 7. We had a couple smaller requests, but yeah, about 6 to 8 depending on the size of the request. Now next year we're anticipating, we're keeping our fingers crossed, but we have allocated a little bit more, so it'd be $1.5 million next year. So hopefully we'll be able to award a few more grants, but it's very competitive. It's 6 or 7 awards, maybe 8 at the most in a year.
Yeah, and
So that's why we do these kinds of workshops to really help folks, understand like how to make their application just as strong as possible. Because I'm sure everyone has a wonderful project that's really critical. That's why you're coming to a webinar today. So last year we had about 40 some applications. There was a question about how many applications we got last year. We had just over 40. The year before we had closer to 70. So it depends in a year, kind of the need and the amount. We obviously can fund just a very small amount of those projects. There's a great need. And that's why we also share information about the other grant programs that exist here at MHT and with our partners, so we can help you with that too.
Are there federal grants that also this group should be aware of that may may be helpful, or is that
On the MHT website, there's a list of other funding sources. Obviously, right now, the status of the federal grants are in a limbo situation, but you can definitely look and understand, and there are a wide variety of federal grants, particularly from the National Park Service, that you can look into. But again, given some of the uncertainty right now, I would say you're going to want to look and see and contact those program administrators to see where those stand. The National Park Service has a wide variety, but then just on the MHT grants landing page, and I think it's also on the Capitol landing page, there's something that says other funding opportunities, and there's a very extensive list from the state, from local jurisdictions, and the federal government.
Right.
Yeah, and it looked like somebody else had their hand raised for a minute.
Yeah, they did the meeting for a minute.
Yeah, it was Patricia. I had my hand raised, and my question was answered regarding whether there were funds for this grant that were federal, so that I didn't get my hopes up and just dash because we don't have federal
No, so
funding.
this grant fund is state money, and it's already been allocated for this round. So
Well, you see what happened with allocated funds at the
Yeah.
federal level, they were sucked back. So, okay. Thank you, State of Maryland.
We definitely 100% at the state level, these funds are available. So we don't anticipate, barring any craziness, that these are going to go away. So we are fully funded for this program for this year coming up. Okay, does anybody else have any questions, want to talk about their project or anything like that?
I'd like to talk about my project in general and get general ideas. If nobody else does want to talk. We've been working on this project since 2021, and we have been removing trees off the property because it had become overrun and dilapidated, of course, and threatened by the trees falling on the building. Previously, there had been a new roof put on the building, and about maybe 15, 20 years ago, and tree fell on it, broke the roof, and so now water is intruding on the property. So then it cascaded into some structural damage inside.
Right.
And So we're, you know, there's layers and layers of things that has to be done in order to keep this historic mill, which is 200 and one of the cornerstones says 200 1771, but we have evidence that it's as old as 1739. And so we need to do the roof. We need to make sure it's tuck pointed. We need to do windows and doors. We have to do floors. We're talking about historic summer beams. And before we can even get down to, you know, making it something that a person can walk through safely. And so that's what we would like to do. Right now, we're using the property that the mill is on as a boat launch or kayak launch, canoe launch. And that's one of the ways that we're raising funds to kind of repair the mill, is to have a membership so that people can come on, they can go and get guided tours and help to do Antietam Creek, what are we calling it? Antietam Creek cleanups. And we're, you know, partnering with the BSA, now Scouts of America, I'm thinking is going to be changed too, and inviting scouts to come out and camp on the site, and then use the boat launch and look at the mill from the outside. And people coming by now, they can actually see the mill and see the disrepair that it's in. And so I guess we're still really trying to figure out what is the first step. We know we have to stop the water intrusion, that roof. But then we have issues with water intrusion from the creek, potentially. It hasn't happened yet.
Right.
And then we have structural, you know, making sure that the summer beams are supported, replaced, repaired, not replaced, but repaired, and windows and doors. So it's going to be a heavy lift. We have plenty of pictures. We had an assessment done, and the assessment is our starting point. We have talked to engineers. We've had a survey, but that's personal money. And so now we're looking, this is my money, and I only have so much to go around. So we're talking about thousands of dollars that we've had outlay. And we want to leave a legacy that we've been involved. And so we've started the nonprofit, and now are partnering with any organization that'll partner with us to, you know, make this happen. So any thoughts, ideas, suggestions, any direction?
Well, it sounds like you kind of already started the process in one of the ways we would suggest, which is, you know, if you don't have a building assessment, let's get that done. Especially, you know, we can look at a building and say, oh, wow, the roof and the foundation needs to be done, but there could be a lot that goes into that. And, you know, do structural members have to be replaced, shingles, you know, kind of what. So you're already kind of ahead of the game as far as getting that assessment done. That would have been the first thing that we suggest. And so, you know, what I would suggest in your application is look at the most critical issues that the assessment talks about. I mean, obviously you have a water damage issue. The number one thing that is going to cause damage based on water is the lack of roofing or lack of good roofing. And so maybe that's the most critical issue that you're going to ask for funding for. And then maybe, you know, the foundation is failing as a result of all this water that's happening. Maybe that's the second most critical issue. You know, hopefully your assessment kind of categorize those and like, let's do this, and this kind of in steps. And if it did that, that's what I would recommend, you know, to kind of include in your application as the most critical item. And so, but it sounds like you have a significant site, you know, and also that you have kind of a game plan moving forward to how you're going to get started on the project. You know, but having that assessment is kind of the biggest deal. And so public benefit is something that you should also really be thinking about. You're starting a nonprofit organization, having a you know, kayak launch or canoe launch, that's great. You're already kind of providing a public benefit, but also think about, let's say, people who aren't going to be kayaking or who aren't going to be associated with your site. You know, what are they going to get out of the historical understanding of your site? You know, once it's completed, let's say that this thing's, you know, it gets to be in perfect condition, which, you know, is always hard to do with a historic building. Kind of what is going to be that public benefit to people who may not be, you know, using the canoe launch? Are they going to be educated on what the mill, you know, kind of did, you know, and how important it was to the region? You know, are they going to be educated in maybe a certain type of preservation technique even that will be used? You know, so keep that in mind. Is that, you know, your public benefit should kind of apply to groups that may have nothing at all to do to your site and can run up on it and have an understanding of it. So, and in your construction project description, definitely be very clear about what the critical items are and how you're going to accomplish that. So if you know, you need new shingles and it has wood shingles, make sure you're going to say, hey, we need to put new wood shingles on the building. And you know, you don't have to get us everything and tell us, you know, that what the size of the shake or anything is, but just let us know that, or let us know that these structural members are damaged and need to be replaced as a result of this tree falling. Make sure you're noting that it will be done in kind, you know, using the same materials that was there before. And I think you'll have a pretty good start on this. And so, and just to kind of go over it, I think I may have sent you an email about this, or maybe we got an email about it. This one's already been listed or is eligible for listing in the National Register. Is that right? I think Stacy's saying yes. So,
yes, it is.
okay, perfect. Then you know, you're definitely eligible to apply. It sounds like you've got a critical issue at a historic site that needs to occur. And as long as you're framing that, you know, well in your project description, that's good. And again, you know, we talked about the individual versus nonprofit stuff. And so, you know, that just know too that, you know, if you're an individual, you're going to have to provide a one-to-one match, but it doesn't have to be a cash match. It can be volunteer time that goes toward the project. It can be materials that you're going to purchase, or that someone can donate toward the project. So it doesn't have to be a cash match, but just know that, you know, anything that's occurred before the grant agreement is actually signed by our secretary, we can't go back and retroactively pay for any of that. We can only pay for stuff from, you know, the time that it's that's signed by our secretary and moving forward. And we have a really good webinar on our webpage that goes over, you know, our match requirements and talks a lot about how to document in-kind matches that aren't cash, you know, like volunteer time. There's like a website you can go and put in the rate, and it'll tell you kind of how much each volunteer will cost, or even your own personal time will cost, you know, providing invoices and stuff like that. So we could see, you know, how much has gone into the project already. So so don't fret if you're an individual. It doesn't mean you have to have $100,000 in cash on hand, but you probably should, you know, think about what volunteer time, what kind of donated materials, things like that can go toward the project, and we can definitely take a look at that.
Okay, that's perfect, because that was a scary thought for me. I mean, I was thinking about where am I going to get that loan from so I can, you know, but now I understand. That's better. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing too is, you know, it is something that kind of worries some of our private or individual, you know, applicants, is like, where do I get the match from? The match can come from a lot of different sources, but just keep in mind, it can't come from another state source. And so if you're looking at doing a match, it can't be another grant from the state of Maryland or a loan from the state of Maryland. It has to come from either a nonprofit grant match or a federal grant match. Those are okay. Fundraising matches, all that works. But we can't use a fund, you know, that's a state fund to match another state project. So, you know, just keep that in mind if you're applying. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions that we can help out with today? Okay. Well, let's see. Oh, how do we know if our site qualifies for the Maryland 250 Commission? We are listed on the National Register, and that's from Jode. Stacy, do you know anything about how to, this is something I'm not as familiar with, if it qualifies for the Maryland 250 Commission?
I can send information on, or I can include that in the chat here, but that program is also housed at MHT, but that is very separate from us. So I'm going to just include a link to their grants page. And I would recommend, they have a whole lot of grants. Actually, refer to our grants. Let's see. I'm going to include the link to their page. I can reach out to them about their specific grant programs. That's what I would recommend doing.
Well, one thing to note, and I could be wrong about this, but does the 250 Commission, is that federal funded?
They have different some of it's state funding as well.
Yeah, different sources. Okay, that's good.
And they do have state funding.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Yeah, we understand things are in a little bit of flux right now. So, hopefully this all get worked out very soon. And so, okay. Did anybody else have any other questions in the chat or any other questions that they might want to talk about? Okay, we do. Sorry,
Okay.
Palmer Boys and Girls Club. Yes, there is a website for certified minority, what we call MBE, WBE firms or contractors. That website is the MDOT website. So MDOT actually is the one that goes through the certification process for minority business enterprises and women-owned business enterprises. And if you'll just give me just a second, MBE list, I could probably try to find that.
I'm pulling up the link right now. I have.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so MBE, that's something else to think about. For projects, it may not apply to the HCAP project because we have a $200,000 or more requirement. So if you receive $200,000 or more, at that point, we're going to ask for MBE reporting for some of that. And so, but if we're going to make up a portion of the project and it's a total of $200,000 or more, even if we're only $50,000 into it, they still need to try to meet the MBE goals. And so we do their goals, though. I just have to stress that they are not a requirement that you meet these, but they're just a requirement that you attempt to meet these. And it's a 29% total contract goal. But we do understand that, certain parts of the state may not have a lot of MBE or WBE certified firms in that location. And then on top of that too, some of this work is going to be highly specialized in historic preservation. There may not be an appropriate MBE or WBE that you can pull in that might have the qualifications to do that. But even if you only do get 50,000 or 100,000, and that's the total of your project, we strongly encourage you to try to find an MBE or a WBE. That's something we've really been pushing for. Another thing too is that if you know a firm that's interested in becoming an MBE or WBE, have that firm reach out to us. I mean, we're happy to try to at least get them in touch with the right people, because it's our idea that the more MBE and WBE that are out there, the better. And it also helps them too, because anytime a state contract comes up, they're kind of pushed at the front of the line for some of this stuff, because people are looking for them to meet these goals. So it's something that we really strongly feel about. And so I think if you have some people that are looking to do it, let us know. And so, but that's only, again, a 200,000 or more, but we strongly suggest it. So Patricia, it sounds like you had another question.
I do. I need a reference for someone who does historic pointing for buildings, historic buildings. And so if there's a way for me to find out who might be able to do that work, or you have some direction to go into.
Well, so it's a little tricky for us because we can't at the state agency recommend specific contracts.
Yeah, I don't need a recommendation though. I just need a general.
So what I can do is try to put together a few groups that we have seen before and we know may have worked on these things, but it will be a bunch of them. It won't be just one.
Sure.
But if you could shoot me an email and let me know, and I can see what we can put together. And it's going to be on you to kind of figure out if some of these groups are even still around and they're up to date. So we can't do it by region,
Sure.
but at least it gives you a starting point.
Yeah. Then the other thing that I'm looking for is maybe state organizations businesses that do beams, timber framing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what we have on that. I'll have to check.
We might have a few folks on our list who've done some of that work, but
I'll shoot you an email.
I would also recommend, like, if you're in a local area, if there's sometimes like a local preservation nonprofit might be a good reach, or if like an architect or some, kind of somebody who's in the circle of work, to ask them as well, just because for an estimate it's fine, but getting to know who the folks are who are doing this kind of work and what their reputation is. That's something we can't provide to you, and that might be really important. So if you do, know somebody who's sort of adjacent to the field, like an architect or something, I'm using that because they work with a lot of different building trades, or somebody who's in the building construction world, you can at least kind of start there too, just because they can give you more honest feedback than we could.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, everybody, thanks for attending today and sticking around with us for this entire time. And again, if you have any questions about your project, feel free to reach out to me. I'll try to get to you as much as I can. I know we're a little bit inundated right now with questions about HVAC, but that's kind of what we're here for. And so, the best way to get in touch with me right now is probably via email, which is right here on your screen. And, I'm happy to set up a meeting. We can talk about your project, go over anything, other questions you might have about your application. And then if nothing else, we look forward to looking at your applications when they come in, and hopefully sometime after March 17th, we'll let you know if we're missing anything. All right. Well, I'm going to stop recording now, and I wish everybody to have a good day. Thanks a lot.